Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Ruach Kudash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Samuel, the 22nd chapter. And 2 Samuel 22, is a psalm of David, which a part of it is paralleled with Psalms 18, okay, in which David praises and thanks the Lord, for all the deliverance that he has wrought, to him, right, and by him. And also, there are a lot of similarities, right, or symbolism here between the psalm that David has sung, and also what the Lord is going to do concerning Israel, right? There are parts in here that symbolize the deliverances of David by the Lord, being likened unto how the Lord is going to deliver Israel in these last days, right? So there's a lot of spiritual and prophetic connections that can be made by this psalm of David. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 22 verse 1. And David spake unto the Lord the words of this song in the day that the Lord had delivered him out of the hand of all his enemies and out of the hand of Saul. And he said, The Lord Yahweh is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. The God of my rock, in him will I trust. And the rock is like your defense. In him will I trust. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my high tower and my refuge, my Savior. Thou savest me from violence. It goes to show you how much David trusted in the Lord, right? In attributing, right, all his victories and deliverances to the Lord, because he understood and knew the Lord and how the Lord worked with him. It is a very important thing. Verse 4, I will call on the Lord Yahweh, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. When the waves of death compassed me, the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. And here he's singing about the times in which, like, you could say, like, near-death experiences, right? And so he likens those situations onto like being like waves, of death, right, that are just surrounding him, right? And as it says, the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. Which goes to show you, right, like in those moments, you read about the valiant acts of David, but he was also a man, right? And as men, yeah, we do get afraid, but that's why faith is there to overcome that. The sorrows of hell compass me about. And the word hell here goes into the grave, I believe in the Hebrew Shawwal, which means the grave, right? And here what he's describing is, once again, his near-death experiences, right? So he says it kind of like death was on every corner. What he means by it compassed him about. The snares of death prevented me, right? So it made him afraid. In my distress, I called upon the Lord Yahweh and cried to my God, and he did hear my voice out of his temple, and my cry did enter into his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of heaven moved and shook because he was wroth, right? And so now you start to see the the symbolism here, right? And how spiritual really this psalm is, because likewise, like you can sort of visualize this sort of scene here with the earth shaking and trembling and the foundations being moved and shaken, because that's going to be a similar theme at the time when the Lord sends Yahweh Shai back in these last days. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it, right? And what this the visual, like, remember, this is a song, right? And so songs are they're kind of like poems that you can sing. And the visual here, right, is similar to that in 2nd Ezra 13, right? Of when it talks about Yahweh Shai, that fire that came out of his was I saw he neither lifted up sword, only I saw as it We have, let me just go get it. Second Ezra 13. Out of his mouth went out fire and tempests and so on. Yeah, here it is. Second Ezra 13 and 10. But only I saw that he sent out of his mouth, as it had been, a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests. Now, Yahushua isn't going to be performing fireball jutsus, from Naruto on here, but, or he might, who knows. But this is referring to from his chariot, right? Because the Lord would give the command, and his chariots is where these blasts would be coming from. Similar to how David refers to here in 2 Samuel 22 about the smoke, right, and the fire coming out of his mouth, devouring and lighting up, as it's like basically it's hot enough to kindle the coals. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet. See, and once again, you can look at this and it alludes to, you could say, right, the actual appearance and the coming forth of the Lord, right? The scriptures say that it was the day of the Lord is darkness and not light. And you would have basically like the chariot of the Lord, just painting a visual here, up top, and everything under it is kind of like overshadowed by his chariot. So under his feet would be like onto under his chariot. And he rode on a chariot, and did fly, and he was seen upon the wings of the wind. Right? The scriptures tell you that every eye is going to see him. And he made darkness pavilions round about him, dark waters and thick clouds of the skies, which is basically symbolizing like a chariot being cloaked inside of a cloud. Now, whether the Lord, it's possible, right, that because we know that the Lord did reveal things to David. So it's possible that David at some point did see these things, because a lot of his songs that he sung were spiritual, and a great deal of them were prophetic as well, right? He's even referred to as a prophet by I believe it was Stephen. I believe it was Stephen, but it's in the book of Acts. So it's possible here that he might be singing about some of the things that he saw as well, which is why it's so accurate when describing. You could look at it and be like, yo, this sounds just like the prophecies concerning the return of the Lord, because technically it is. So you could see how in some of David's songs, he's prophesying concerning future things to come. Verse 13, through the brightness before him were coals of fire kindled, right? Which the appearing of the Lord would be in a chariot, right? And likening that brightness to like the lights, okay? Because the chariots, if you see them in real life, whether it's in the daytime or the nighttime, they're very bright. Because for it to be in the daytime and still see it as a white light goes to show you that it's very bright, right? And in the nighttime as well, it looks like most of the time you'll see it looks like orange, like a little orange ball of light in the sky. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice. He sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and discomfited them. See, similar to, once again, the verses we read above. Like the lasers coming forth of the Lord's chariot. And the channels of the sea appeared. The foundations of the world were discovered. So one at the time might think that David is just being poetic here with his speech. But now you can see and understand that, no, in fact, this is actually prophetic, because at the time of David, during David's time, the Lord didn't do this, right? That there's no account of like during the Lord defending David and shooting like arrows and lightnings, at his enemies, and then causing the channels of the sea, which is like the foundations of the sea, to be visible. Okay. But we know that this theme goes in line with like what you can expect to see at the return of Yahushua, right? As the earth is reeling to and fro, as his chariot is here, he's shooting, the laser beams and so on from the chariot, as we just read in 2 Ezra 13. right? You're also going to have missiles flying, which are in the scriptures are also likened onto arrows. But as it says here in verse 16, and the channels of the sea appeared, which once again, the channels go into like the foundation. Oh, well, there you go. The foundations of the world were discovered, right? So meaning it was visible now. At the rebuking of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils. So it's also at the same time like exhorting or exalting the Lord, right? Describing his power, that at the breath of his nostrils, the it's like water being parted, you know, so the force being so strong that this deep body of water can be parted, and all you see is the actual bare ground of it at the bottom. He sent from above, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. See, and there goes the symbolism there, right? Because this in this instance, David would be likened onto the elect, right? Who, as it says, sent from above, like in Revelation 18th chapter, right? Come up hither. Was it? Is that also in Isaiah 26, if I'm not mistaken, either 20 and 26 or 26 and 20, right? But here the David is being likened onto the elect, because that's what's going to happen, right? The Lord is going to come in a chariot, and he's going to beam up, he's going to draw up his elect, as it says, out of many waters. Now when you go to the book of Revelation, the 17th chapter, it likens waters onto peoples, nations, kindreds, and tongues. Okay, so once again, going showing a lot of the symbolism here, in this chapter. Verse 18, he delivered me from my strong enemy and from them that hated me, for they were too strong for me. Which the Lord did do, right? He did deliver David from the hands of his enemies, but also symbolically, the Lord is going to deliver his elect, which David is also likened onto, as the Lord is delivering the house of David, but he's going to deliver his elect from our enemies, right? Primarily Esau, Edom. And that's why we have to wait upon the Lord, because he is too strong for us, right? In a carnal sense, we don't have the physical power to deliver ourselves. They prevented me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay, right? So let's look into this word prevented. Kodam, to confront, to meet, to anticipate, all right, which makes sense. Right, so they basically confronted me. They came after me, right, in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay, the stay being like your defense or your support. And then once again, it's going to be the same for the elect in this time, right? Isaiah 59 and 19. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. Verse 20, he brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. Right. And just as the Lord did that for David, once again, symbolizing how the Lord is also going to deliver his elect, whom he delights in. Right. The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands hath he recompensed me. And as we're going to go on further to read, David mentions how the Lord judges every man as his works shall be, right? To those that are right, the Lord is going to be right. And to those that are wicked, the Lord is going to show them wickedness. But here, as he's saying, due to, the integrity or the pureness of my heart, according to my righteousness, my deeds and my acts, right, the Lord recompensed me accordingly. And that's also why the Lord had mercy on David, because David was very merciful as well. And even though he committed grievous sins, the Lord had mercy on him and put them away. For I have kept the ways of the Lord Yahweh, and have not wickedly departed from my God. So, yes, there were moments, and I always say this, right, that you have righteous men that have done wicked things, okay? And you also have wicked men that have done righteous things. But that's not what determines whether they are righteous or wicked, okay? A wise man can have a moment of folly, and even a fool can say wise things at some point. But the Lord looks at the inward part, and that's why he had mercy on David, because David ended up repenting from that. So when he says here, he has not wickedly departed from his God, meaning that his heart stayed after the Most High, whether in when he was doing good or when he slipped, he basically always drew nigh and kept his heart after the Lord. For all his judgments were before me, and as for his statutes, I did not depart from them. So David always kept the Lord in mind, right? The things that he required of him, his the fear of the Lord, right? All of those things he always, he says, he didn't depart from them. He stuck to them. I was also upright before him, and have kept myself from mine iniquity. Therefore the Lord hath recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his eyesight. And that's a very key and important part right there, right? That David is saying that the Lord basically judged me according to my righteousness, right? According to the things that I've done. And you'll notice there are some men, when you read in the scriptures, that'll say that, like, Lord, look at me, just as I have done for such and such, please remember me and do that for me, or have mercy on me. And the key word, or the key part here, as it says, according to my cleanness in his eyesight, not your cleanness in the eyesight of men or your cleanness in the eyesight of women, but your cleanness in the eyesight of the Lord. And what that means is there are times when the things that the Lord sees as clean or righteous, the world doesn't see it the same way. And they may look at you as being wicked, or I mean, that's how the majority of the world look at us, as, they don't really see us the way the Lord sees us. But whose sight and whose judgment of you is more important? Clearly the Lord. With the mercy, or with the merciful, thou will shew thyself merciful. See, and David was an example, and that's why he's speaking as he is, because he actually experienced that. And with the upright man, thou will shew thyself upright. With the pure, thou will shew thyself pure, and with the froward, thou will shew thyself unsavory. So if you're pure-hearted and you serve the Lord and you're sincere, and you have those good characteristics about you, and you exemplify that, the Lord will deal with you accordingly. Like the saying goes, do unto others as you want to be done unto you. But if you're a grimy, wicked individual, or you're a niggard, what do you think the Lord is going to do to you? You deal treacherously with others, but you want the Lord to deal faithfully with you. That's not how it works. And the afflicted people thou wilt save. And who do the afflicted people represent? Israel. And primarily those that are going to be saved out of them are going to be the elect. But thine eyes are upon the haughty, that thou mayest bring them down. And generally speaking, that's the proud, right? But who fits that category? Esau, Edom, right? He fully exemplifies that. And as it says, that thou mayest bring them down, which the Lord will do in due time. For thou art my lamp, O Lord Yahweh, and the Lord will lighten my darkness, right? I.e., your lamp is likened unto light or guidance. So in the time of darkness or uncertainty, the Lord will be that light for you. For by thee I have run through a troop, by my God have I leaped over a wall. And now David here goes into the the power, right, or the might, that though people would attribute to David as being a mighty man, he gives the credit to the Lord, to acknowledge and say, well, Lord, it was really your spirit that gave me that ability, right, to be so valiant in war, to be able to destroy a troop, to be able to scale walls. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord Yahweh is tried. He is a buckler to all them that trust in him. And a buckler means a shield, right? So the Lord is like a fortress. He is a shield. He is a defense to all they that put their trust in him. For who is God save the Lord, right? Who is the Most High? Who is the power save Yahweh? And who is a rock or a defense save our God? God is my strength and power. He maketh my way perfect. And that's a beautiful kind of spirit, right, that David had, to acknowledge that. A lot of people get put in places of power, and it goes to their head, and they start to look at themselves as more than they are, not realizing that all that is been something that's given to them of the Lord. He maketh my feet like hinds feet, and setteth me upon my high places. Now, the thing about this here, right? Hind's feet, a hind, which is like a female deer or roe, they're very agile, right? But also like cats, they have an interesting characteristic about them, and other animals have that too. But it's called oh, is it what, active registering? Let me see, cats. Mm, hope I'm saying it right. Is it active registering? Something. Let me see. What is it called when cats? Um, their exactly stepped. There's a name for it. Direct registering. There it is. So let's look that up. Direct registering animals. So it says here the way cats walk is called feline direct registering. The cat's back paws land in the same spot that the front paws did. This helps them walk quietly and minimizes visible footprints and scent. And it's the same thing for for deer, okay, or a hind. Let's see if I can find that in here. But they also have that trait as well, okay, on top of their speed and agility. But if you've ever observed, like a cat is a more domestic animal, so you can see that. But there's hind and different other animals that also um, exhibit this trait of direct registering, where their back feet can step in the same exact spot as their front feet when they walk. Okay, which if you are say like scaling a like on a certain slope or the side of a rock or a cliff, which allows them like goats to be able to like get to those high points. If your front feet step in, make a path, and it's safe because it's been tested already by your front feet stepping there, the back feet can step in the same spots and minimize the chances of you stepping in the wrong place and maybe like, you know, stepping on a unsure footing and then slipping and falling and stuff like that. So going back, it's part of their agility, right? And their well, agility is the best word to use here. But here, as David is saying, he making my feet like hinds feet and setteth me upon my high places. Now read this in the NLT as well. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, enabling me to stand on mountain heights, which is just symbolizing, like once again, the stability, but also the agility and the power that the Lord gave David. Because David and his men they weren't like ordinary fighters, right? If anything, they were extraordinary fighters. Whenever they referred to as mighty men, it's not just like a saying. It's because they actually were mighty and valiant. And we'll read about his mighty men. I think either later in this chapter or in the next chapter. Yeah, probably the next chapter. And they accomplished some pretty hefty feats. He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. Thou and the Lord is going to do that for us too, right? He's gonna strengthen our hands and teach our hands to war. And what is an example of that? Like so you may look at, say, somebody like Floyd Mayweather, right, who's a boxer, and you may look at other boxers, and there's some boxers that have been boxing longer than him, and some that maybe have been boxing around the same time as him, but they're not as good as him, right? And so in this case, there are certain people where, yes, you may still need to be taught how to fight or the basics, but when the Lord teaches you, it's like innate. It's already within you. It's with ease. What may take somebody, 2 months to understand, you do it in like 2 days, to where you just become exceptionally and abnormally good at it, right? That's like the difference between being taught of man and the Lord teaching you. So in this case, when the Lord teaches your hands to war, you become skillful, abnormally skillful, right? Extraordinarily skillful. Thou was also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy gentleness hath made me great. Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, so that my feet did not slip. So you've given me a sure path, and that I may have a stability, because that's what that symbolizes. I have pursued my enemies and destroyed them, and turned not again until I had consumed them. And I have consumed them and wounded them, that they could not arise. Yea, they are fallen under my feet. And this is what happens when you trust in the Lord, right? So David was able to conquer all his enemies through the spirit and power of the Lord. For thou hast girded me with strength to battle them, to battle them that arose up against me, hast thou subdued under me. So all the enemies, as he's saying here, that rose up against me, you basically, even though the Lord used David and his men, David understood that it was the Lord doing it anyway. So as he says, thou hast subdued um, those enemies under me. Thou hast also given me the necks of mine enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me. They looked, but there was none to save, even unto the Lord, but he answered them not. So David had the upper hand over his enemies, and he crushed them so much that in seeking, deliverance, they sought to go everywhere, even unto the Lord, cried unto the Lord, but he didn't answer them. Then did I beat them as small as the dust of the earth. I did stamp them as the mire of the street. Now it says, and did spread them abroad. Now when you read this in another translation, right, I ground them as fine as the dust of the earth. David is likening him dominating his enemies to a millstone that's grinding meal or like grain, because you put the if you know how it works, right, you put the meal or the grain in the center, and you actually grind and grind and grind, and the two stones grinding the grain in between is to crush it to where it becomes refined like flour. So here he's likening obviously him conquering his enemies completely, as to how a millstone crushes and grinds a grain into small, like, you know as here he likens it onto the dust. Okay, but like we read in the other translation, um I forgot how it was worded. Let me read it again. Yeah, it says, I ground them as fine as the dust of the earth. Thou also hast delivered me from the strivings of my people. Thou hast kept me to be head of the heathen. A people which I knew not shall serve me. And once again, right, the symbolism here, where in David's time, yes, the Lord, delivered him, as it says, from the strivings of my people, from those those that would come against him, and also set him up, as it says, head of the heathen, meaning the Lord established David's kingdom, and as we read, how he conquered the Syrians, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Philistines, and he basically had dominion over all of them, right? A people which I knew not shall serve me. And this is also symbolic of the elect, right? Because the Lord is going to raise us up according to prophecy, right? And above all these other nations. And they are going to serve, just as, during David's time, he had these neighboring nations serving under him. And this time, the Lord is going to have the world nations serving under the house of David. Verse 45, strangers shall submit themselves unto me. As soon as they hear, they shall be obedient unto me. See? And once again, similarly, that's how the Lord is going to set things back in order, as he establishes the house of David, which represent the elect, and all these nations under. Okay, as they're going to submit themselves onto the Lord's elect, just as David's enemies and these nations, these neighboring nations, submitted themselves onto him. Strangers shall fade away, and they shall be afraid out of their closed places. Yeah, so they're gonna be made weak, right, and afraid, just as they were of David. They will be in this time when the Lord raises up his his chosen, right, which is gonna start and be led by Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, and Yahweh Shai. Say that. Verse 47: The Lord Yahweh liveth, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of the rock of my salvation. Right? So the Lord lives, And blessed be Yahweh, who is the rock, right, of my salvation. It is God that avengeth me, and that bringeth down the people under me, and that bringeth me forth from mine enemies. Thou also hast lifted me up on high above those that rose up against me. Thou hast delivered me from the violent men. And now, in our time, who symbolizes the violent man? Esau, Edom. Okay, and just as the Lord delivered David, he's going to deliver the house of David as well, right, which are the elect, from ultimately the violent man, which is Esau, Edom. Therefore, I will give thanks unto thee, O Yahweh, among the heathen, and I will sing praises unto thy name. He is the tower of salvation for his king, and sheweth mercy to his anointed, unto David, and to his seed forevermore. See? So that's why it's so spiritual, because as David sung about the mercy and the deliverance that the Lord shewed to him and onto his seed, the Lord is going to show a similar kind of mercy onto the seed of David, right? Which is eventually in this time being built as the house of David, but on a on a grander scale, right? And which is why I was drawing those comparisons, and those prophetic linkings from this spiritual Psalm of David to what's actually going to take place in our time now. And that brings us to the end of 2 Samuel, the 22nd chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakha Kodesh. Until next time, Shalom.